I made a game design mistake by using colors as a game mechanic in my cancelled game Color Space, and I made the same mistake again with my new game Hyperslice. I reused what I had created for Color Space to make Hyperslice, and I really wanted to keep the color mechanic. I thought it could be a nice way to set the game apart, and I truly thought it could be used in interesting ways. The fun thing is, at this moment, I already knew why the mechanic didn't work with the previous game. I talked about it in my first devlog. Combining a game that requires speed and precision with a difficult mechanic like color switching didn't make any sense. Both ideas were conflicting, and I was starting to do the same thing with Hyperslice. I wanted this game to be fast and put the player into a flow state where they dash from enemies to enemies. Adding color switching on top of that simply put you out of this flow state and feels like a chore. I realize how hard it is to let go of certain ideas. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because as a designer, you have a vision that not everyone sees, and sometimes you need a lot of work and tweaking to turn a mechanic into something viable. I think we get attached to our ideas too easily, and it can be difficult to see them for what they really are. Lots of people told me to let go of the idea, but not necessarily for the right reasons. I think outside feedback is crucial when making something, but it can also be very detrimental, as judging an idea too early is really easy and can kill good ideas before they're ready. When I get feedback on something, I try to understand what the player is experiencing and why it doesn't work. Players often try to give suggestions, but I'm more interested in the feeling. They might have a solution to their problem, but it doesn't mean it's the right one. If a weapon is OP but super fun, the easy solution is to nerf it. But why is it fun? Why not lean into the fun and make the other weapon more OP and thus more fun? As always, there are many ways to solve problems, and the easy way might be the wrong one if you want to maximize your game's potential. The last thing that helped me realize the mechanic didn't work was taking time off of it. I disabled the colors entirely and played like that for a while. Even if the game was pretty barebone, it was already much more fun. When I tried to add color randomly to a small percentage of enemies, I realized how painful it was. When colors were present all the time, it was a constant struggle to switch to the right color to kill the enemies, and having a few colored enemies during waves was also a struggle, as you were not into the habit of switching color often. It was then a, oh fuck, where's the button for that color moment. This was the last nail in the coffin for the color mechanic, and honestly, I don't regret it at all. I'm just wondering why I tried to keep it for as long as that. I think part of the reason was that I wanted to keep another distinctive mechanic, and I was afraid of otherwise having a generic game. So in the end, I think keeping it simple is the way to go. It's incredibly easy to want to add stuff, but most often keeping the core ideas simple enough is the best option. Now, each time I want to add or modify something, I ask myself if it's going to make the core mechanic and gameplay better. It's now obvious that adding a color switching mechanic is just making things harder and more tedious. Since the last devlog, the game has evolved a lot. I've worked on way too many things to showcase all of them. I did a lot of visuals because I wanted to update the Steam page and trailer to get them more up to date with what the game was and will be. I added different ships and their ultimates. I'd love to make a video on that specifically. I think it could be interesting to show the full process behind just one seemingly easy feature, so let me know what you think in the comments. I reworked the visuals of most enemies, and I've added 2 new ones, lasers and snipers. I'm still unsure about how to scale the difficulty of the game. I feel like just spawning more enemies all the time is not going to cut it. Maybe having more enemies that are harder to beat and maybe with more health could help. Speaking of health, enemies can now have more health and their color reflects that. This encourages you to prioritize certain enemies and also to use your push dash more often, as enemies will get one shot when hitting the walls after a push. To make it easier to fight, I've added some abilities you can purchase in a shop with the gems dropped by enemies during the run. At the moment, I only have 3. Explosion on dash, a mine drop on dash, and a mine stuck to enemies when pushing them. Let me tell you, it gets crazy when you have explosion and mine on dash. A bit too crazy, to be honest. I need to find ways to make the abilities a bit less OP, as it really removes the core gameplay and it makes the game quite messy. And now that I've said that, I realize that I talked about earlier about weapons being OP and the solution maybe not removing them. I need to think about that a bit more. I thought about having a probability instead of triggering the ability 100% of the time, or making the ability much smaller, like a tiny explosion. The last idea is just to rework the ability to be less about dealing lots of damages, and maybe more about enemy control or other things. If you have ideas, please let me know. Also, don't hesitate to join the Discord and playtest the game. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. One last cool thing I've explored to showcase in the trailer is multi-arena. As the game plays only in arenas, I thought it could be cool to explore things around the arena itself. I have some ideas where the player could go outside, but for now, I'll keep everything inside. I've tried adding multiple arenas, letting the player dash through the walls. This could be interesting to avoid certain enemies and encourage the player to be really mobile. I'll have to try that in playtest to see how people react. It could end up being a bit janky if not done right. I want to thank the Patreons on Patreon for their support. If you want to help me make this game, you can support me on Patreon and get access to some cool stuff. And of course, wishlist the game on Steam, it's free and it helps me a ton. From now on, I want to focus on enemies, making sure they're interesting and also harder to fight as you progress through the waves. I think I finished working on the different ultimates, so now I need to focus on having more upgrades and different abilities. If you have suggestions on what abilities you want to see or even upgrades, let me know in the comments below. I didn't talk much about the special waves, but I have things that I'm working on right now and I think it's going to be pretty exciting. Just to give you a glimpse, we are going to have special waves, mini bosses and bosses. I'm really excited for those because I think it's going to help me explore other ideas around movement and slicing. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!